Good morning and welcome to Monday Manna. I'm your host, Frank Adams. I want to talk with you today about managing stress in ministry. Managing stress in ministry. The Bible says in Proverbs 12:25, anxiety in the heart weighs it down. A 2013 study from the Shader Institute reports that 1,700 pastors leave the ministry each month. Lifeway research kind of balances that out and actually says more realistically about 250 leave each month. That still is in excess of 2,500 pastors who leave the ministry every month. Dealing with stress or managing stress in ministry. If you're experiencing stress, despair, or depression because of ministry, I want you to know that you're in good company. Jesus is all too familiar with the stress of ministry. So much so that he sweat drops of blood. The Apostle Paul and the other authors and ministers of the New Testament were very much familiar with the reality of stress in ministry. I too am one who has dealt with stress in ministry. So I may not be a psychologist, but I am a ministry veteran. So I want to talk to you about managing stress and anxiety in ministry. Likely we'll do this in 2 or 3 parts. This is part 1. Anxiety has been referred to as the official emotion of our day. Dr. Mayo, a famed psychologist, stated that one of the most urgent problems of our day in America is stress or anxiety, and that it's become a part of the American culture. He went on to say that you could write on countless American gravestones this epitaph: hurried, worried, and buried. John Hagee in 1987 stated that the number of mentally disturbed in America exceeded the population of Canada. The root cause of those disturbances was stress, worry, and fear. The most intriguing subject in modern medicine is the ability of the mind to produce varied disturbances in the physical body. Hence the term psychosomatic illness. Invariably, emotional tension in the mind and emotion can produce visible damage to the body. Some of these are serious and even fatal. So we need to learn to deal with stress in ministry. Webster defines stress as strain, pressure, urgency, and tension, and strained exertion. Bill and Donna Blackburn says that stress is the pressure we feel from positive or negative events in our life. Stress refers to the demands or activities that stretch our ability to respond comfortably and describe the feeling of distress or negative tension that occurs because of all of these demands. These feelings can include anxiety, anger, boredom, depression, as well as physical feelings of headaches, irritable bowel, and chronic fatigue. Bill and Vonetta Bright in their book, Managing Stress in Marriage, observed that stress is an unexpected guest. They state that stress resembles that unexpected guest because stress comes unexpectedly. Stress interrupts your planned activities, and stress can create problems in relationships. Stress is a reality of ministry. 90% of pastors report that they work between 55 and 70 hours a week. 50% of pastor survey stated that they feel unable to fulfill the demands of the ministry and of their parishioners. So it does create anxiety and stress in ministry. It's hard to deal with the emotion when you feel like there's so many demands on your life and so few real achievements. Let me talk with you first of all to make some observations about stress. First of all, stress is a reality of life. Stress is not only uninvited and often unexpected, it's also unavoidable. Stress in ministry is unavoidable. It's interesting that in the book of Daniel, Daniel 7:25, one of the tactics of the enemy is to wear out the saints. I believe that tactic is very effective with ministers in ministry today. The enemy just wants to throw so much at you for such a long period of time that you will just burn out and wear out and become no use to the Lord in ministry. So stress is a reality of life. Stress is not only uninvited and unexpected, it's also unavoidable. Stress is part of life that we must manage. We must manage the stress, or that stress will begin to manipulate our life. Stress itself is neither good or bad. It's what we make of it that really counts. How we handle that stress is what is really important. Stress is a reality in ministry. Burnout is a reality in ministry. That's why many of the denominations are suggesting, and some even requiring, that ministers take a 30-day sabbatical at minimal every 5 years. I'm of the opinion it ought to be at least annually in order to not give time for the stress to build up and the burnout. The stress of the ministry becomes the stress of the family, the stress of the marriage, and the stress of the children. So we must deal with that big elephant in the room in ministry, and that is, how do we deal with stress? Since stress in ministry and stress in leadership is unavoidable, we must learn how to do with it. Stress can be good when it motivates us to action. It can be a positive thing. But we must recognize that one of the most effective tactics of the devil is to simply wear out the saints. So if you feel the enemy is wearing you out, just one thing after another coming at you, then just remember you're not alone. It is one of the hazards of ministry, and we must learn to deal with it. As I mentioned earlier, stress is caused both by good and bad situations in life, but both of these must be managed. It's interesting that the body does not know the difference between good and bad stress, and it processes it or responds to both in the same way. Unmanaged stress has many ill effects on the human body. A lot of people have physical maladies that do not have their origin in the physical body, but are actually psychosomatic. Not that they're not real, they're very much real, but they're caused, they are stem from the emotional imbalance in a person's life. The biochemical and cardiovascular system and muscles tone change that are brought on in the body by stress. And it prepares the body for either the fight, the flight, or responses. So we have to learn to deal with stress. No matter what normally happens when we try to run from stress, we discover that our running from stress just causes the stress to intensify. So much we must stop, take our stand, and deal with the stress in ministry. Stress can be a response to real or imagined situations. The body makes no differentiation. Sometimes the stress of ministry is real. The situation, the circumstances, the parishioners' demands, they're real. But also, they can become imaginary. In other words, there are some of the root causes of stress are actually created in the imagination of our minds. In other words, it's not as it appears. And we must be able to distinguish between the real and deal with it and that which is imaginary and deal with it. The mind does not differentiate between what is real and what is imaginary. If it is only going on in your mind, it will still trigger the emotions and the negative effects as if it were going on in reality and trigger negative effects. Good stress creates a short-term feeling of exhilaration. Bad stress, on the other hand, creates long-term physical and psychological wear and tear. The vital difference between good stress and bad stress is determined by three factors. First of all, your sense of choice. In other words, is this thrust upon me? Do I find myself in a situation that I have not created, or it's not something that I've entered into and taken on the reality of stress because I want to achieve something? Therefore, if it's like that, then I've had a choice. I choose to strap on the reality of the pressures and the stress so that I can choose a specific goal. The other difference between good stress and bad stress, not only does it give me a choice or is it thrust on me, but your degree of control of that stress. In other words, can you manage it? Is it realistically simply part of the vision and the mission that you have embraced? The third thing is your ability to anticipate consequences. Every movement, every decision has consequences. And so one of the things that brings stress is that when we are attempting to lead in a certain situation and we don't anticipate some negative consequences, then we'll be shocked when it comes and it'll catch us off guard. But there's just some realities that if you're going to lead people, particularly if you're going to lead change and you're going to make cultural changes and real life changes, then you ought to expect that those changes are going to have the consequences. They're going to bring stress, and you must embrace them. So stress is a reality. It's a part of ministry. That doesn't make it any easier, but at least you and I are in good company. The Lord is very much aware of the stress of ministry. He's able to take those things from us as we lay them at His feet, and God gives us grace in our heart to deal with whatever His hand has given us to do. We don't carry the responsibility on our own, but casting all our cares, our anxieties, our stress upon Him because He cares for us. I always like to point out the fact that He cares for us is a verb. God is actively caring for us. I hope these few introductory thoughts will pique your interest. Next week, we'll come back and we'll deal more specifically in the areas of stress. Let me offer myself to you. If you're dealing with stress and you don't have anyone to speak with, the contact information is at the bottom of this podcast. Feel free to contact me or email me, and be glad to have a confidential conversation with you. God bless you. We'll see you next week on Monday Manna.